Hey, you early birds. Welcome to DC 101, Serve Your City, Ward 6 Mutual Aid. We're going to drop the hot knowledge that's necessary for our community to survive in these challenging times. We're going to do this all here together as one, as a community in love and in grace and certainly in blessing. So just be patient. We're going to allow some time for our folks, for our people to come on in to the shebang and the party and the special ed classroom that we're going to develop for you here tonight. Yes, we are DC 101, and for you old heads who've been here in Washington DC for a long time, that's exactly right. I co-opted the Hard Rock station DC 101. You know what I'm saying? It was so popular back in the day, back in the old times. You know, I remember it as a kid. Could never stand the music, but I did love the message. I did love the frequency. I did love the explosion of DC 101, and DC 101 is something that we need because we got to take it way back, to figure out how we got here today. So just be patient. We're getting set. We're introducing folks. For you early birds, we're going to drop in a lot of knowledge in the chat. So please follow the chat function. Please make sure your chat function is ready to go. Hopefully at the end we'll have some time to take questions, and if you want to stay a little bit later to talk it through, we can do that. But we do have a tight, concise, precise presentation for everyone tonight. Welcome. We gotta stop having this DC 101 on a Monday night. This should be a Friday night. We got a Friday night groove. You know, whether it's Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. Hey, toast to you. You know, we can celebrate at any given time. You know, life is not promised to us, so what are we waiting for? Do it today. Do it right now. Peace and blessings. I see my man Dominic Molden dropped in. You know, he's going to school me on whatever I have to say, because this man got 500 more thousand words to say than I do about the history of Washington, D.C. God bless Dominic Molden, my mentor. God bless him. Thank you for joining us. Dominic Molden, One DC, organizing neighborhood equity D.C. Been doing it for a long time. Saving Shaw, saving Brookland Manor, saving Garfield Terrace, saving Greenleaf in Southwest, saving Potomac Gardens, saving James Creek. We can go on and on. Our people are everywhere. DC 101, for all you young people, y'all may not know about DC 101. DC 101 was a rock and roll station here back in the day. And that's when we only had radio to entertain ourselves, you know, with music. This is before music videos. This is before all that time, before MTV, before cable. We had radio. We're old enough to remember when we just had radio and TV as our only entertainment. And DC 101 was the rock station. And what we have done, we have purposely co-opted that hard rock station. They had a lot of pizzazz, great ads, great promo. And I said, even as a kid, you know, I can't stand this hard rock music, Black Sabbath. I wasn't into that junk. But I did love the promotion of DC 101. And I did love the way that it brought some of the people together. Amen. All right, we're going to get started. My name is Maurice Cook. I'm the founder and executive director of Serve Your City. But what that really basically means is I'm a worker. I'm a worker just like all of the other workers out here in the world, around the globe. Just a worker trying to do what's best and what's right and give our people as much as we possibly can. Serve Your City is here to make sure that when the system's working, there's another system that is there prepared to take care of our people. But sometimes by design, the system does not work for a certain demographic of folks. And so that's what Serve Your City is purposed to do. And I'm also one of the co-organizers of Ward 6 Mutual Aid. Serve Your City is a nonprofit organizational hub infrastructure for Ward 6 Mutual Aid. And it's been a blessing over the last 10, 11 months to develop, all the resources, to receive all the resources and develop all the processes and systems that we've needed to have in order to make sure that our people are eating every day, making sure that our people have the supplies that they need every day, the toiletries, making sure that our people have masks all around the city, making sure that our people have different types of programming and structural activities and opportunities out here that we've been able to offer folks around the city. And that's our blessing. We are hubbed in Ward 6, but we have love from Wards 1 to Ward 8 and even to Ward 9. And on the best days, I even have some love for Ward 3. We see how it goes. That's a tenable relationship. That's a strange relationship. But yes, but we have love for everyone across the city, all of the people who live within our city. And I want to welcome you formally to DC 101 Housing and Development. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to a partner of mine who we run the streets together, doing good things. We could easily run the streets together doing bad things, but we choose to run the streets together doing good things. And this brother here, I met this brother a few years back, and I've seen this brother, just transform and be such an angel to the work that we have to do on the street for our people who are living on the street. I want to introduce you to Mr. General Reginald Black.
Thanks, Maurice. Yeah, I guess I am a general. Hello, everybody. My name is Reginald Black. I am actually the advocacy director for the People for Fairness Coalition. I'm also a native Washingtonian. I'm glad you're here with us tonight to talk about these subjects here, including the housing and the development, because this is very important to what's going on in our neighborhoods, conversations that are all over the city. But first, we want to make sure that people kind of get a correct framing of where we came from. And so if we can go to the next slide, we're just going to explore a little history of the District of Columbia. First off, the history of housing is the history of land and land use. DC was once the home of the Piscataway and the Nachotek people. They actually were forced out during colonization in 1650. European colonists enslaved African people in DC until slavery was abolished on April 16th, 1862, which is actually Emancipation Day here in the district. Slavery was then replaced with a combination of violent racial terror and legal Jim Crow segregation. Redlining was also used as a real estate segregation, and this was made possible through a series of policies, racially restricted deed covenants that barred the sale or rental of housing to Black people and Jews in certain areas of the city. The Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, would not lend money to purchase homes to Black people, while loans to white people dramatically increased home ownership. Black areas were completely segregated, starved of resources, and cut off from social services. And to give a little more history, I have a pretty cool brother here by the name of James Shabazz. Okay. Good evening. I
My name is James Shabazz. I'm the spokesman for OVEC, Organized Vendors for Economic Cooperation. And I'm just going to give a brief history or overview of some things that occurred in this city between 1870 and the present. By 1870, Washington, D.C. had evolved a powerful local government with a mayor and city council. The last mayor of Washington, D.C. Was Matthew G. Emory. He and his government was overthrown by a Southern-controlled Congress in 1871. City council seats, committees, and jobs were held by many Blacks. The mayor's office and administration contained Black middle-class businessmen. The DC government and its Black and white citizens even had a powerful statehood movement at that time. After the DC government was overthrown, a congressional control board was established with 3 commissioners in place of a mayor and city council. Now, Senator John Tyler Morgan, a plantation owner, Ku Klux Klan leader, and a former Confederate general, replied when he asked why he lit the fuse to overthrow the DC government. And he said, "It was necessary to burn down the barn to get rid of the rats being the Negro population and the barn being the DC government. The Southern controlled Congress hated the existence of the ex-slaves in DC, many of them refugees from sharecropper plantations. They hated the Black middle class, especially Black entrepreneurs. And they hated the growing unity between white citizens and the Black middle class."
Next slide, please.
By the 1940s, the DC citizens had evolved a grassroots provisional government in the form of civic associations. While there were separate civic associations for Black and white, they often united as one citizenry when negotiating with the control board and Congress for resources in the city. Their grassroots government contained tenant associations, homeowners block clubs, parent teachers associations, churches, unions, businesses, student governments, colleges and universities, veterans, and even police officials. They had active committees, budgets, lawyers, and an army of volunteers. They were effective in their efforts to get some resources for the city. However, the poor, the unemployed, and the homeless Black population lived in rooming houses or back alley shanty towns. They were ignored by Congress, despised by the white population, and rejected by the Black middle class. From the 1940s until the riots of 1968, vast projects called urban renewal or Negro removal plans removed poor Blacks from the alleys and rooming houses and placed them in public housing. However, by 1970, there was a growing Black homeowner and commercial class in the city. By 1972, the DC citizens once again had home rule, had a home rule government with a member of Congress. A new feature was added, the advisory neighborhood commissioners. The idea was to transfer the provisional powers of the civic associations into a tangible grassroots level of DC government. For 20 years, the ANCs were effective, in large part because the active leaders of civic associations became ANCs as well. By 1990, however, this generation was dead or retired. And since then, the ANCs have become weak and ineffective in Black DC, and many commissioners elsewhere are developers or real estate lobbyists. By 1996, the DC government was overthrown again. A control board was established again. By 2000, the control board had created a new government under the Anthony Williams administration. In the last 25 years, tens of thousands of Black people have been gentrified. The old Black homeowners class is under pressure to sell, and nearly 50,000 public housing tenants are set to be gentrified. The Black underclass of the 1940s through the 90s has now grown to nearly 10,000 homeless people living in shelters or tent cities. So as I end this report, I ask one question. How does Black DC stop gentrification and reverse its effects?
Thank you, Brother Shabazz. I believe we'll be handing this back over to Mr. Cook.
All right. Right here on this slide, you see a timeline of our past and current leadership. And, you know, if you think about all the things that have happened in the last 30 years, even though this may indicate, you know, approximately 20 years, it took time for the plan to be implemented by these leaders. And so here's the timeline, and it's a challenge because, you know, for the most part, the overwhelming majority of Black people, they vote for the Democratic Party, and all of the harms that have occurred this is just the truth. You can't change the fact that this has happened under Democratic leadership. And so if you think back to Mayor Anthony Williams, who I always call the architect of, you know, what you see here in Washington, D.C., and moving along to the one-time mayor serving Adrian Fenty, all the way through the person that we don't have here on this list because of all of the challenges that he faced politically is Vince Gray. But if you move from Vince Gray to Muriel Bowser, and you see a pattern, and a lot of connections that resonate. And one of the challenges that we're having now is an issue that we have with the relationship between the developers and our political officials, our office holders, the folks that we vote for, the Democrats that we vote for. And one of the things that I want you to do, and hopefully this is in the chat, we have a petition going on right now. It's a Gofundme petition, and hopefully that's in the chat. This Gofundme petition is to save the Secret Garden, and the Secret Garden is a cherished, treasured space off of MLK Avenue behind We Act Radio and Check It Enterprises. And these are Check It Enterprises and We Act Radio. These are Black-owned businesses. We Act Radio, the famous, you know, a world-renowned radio station hosted by my brother Kamon Freeman, and God bless his soul. I saw that, you know, We Act actually had an accident. Something happened. Somebody, you know, smashed the window in front of We Act last night. And so, you know, we still have so many challenges that we have to address. And then certainly the home of the future Go-Go Museum, Go-Go being the official music of Washington, D.C., and the dope mute Go-Go movement that has occurred in response to the rapid gentrification, you know, first starting in Shaw, but of course this is an issue throughout our city. And so Check It Enterprises and the future Go-Go Museum, as well as We Act Radio, behind those buildings is the Secret Garden. And this is a place of community rebirth where the community can come and share in love and in spirit and in community, hosting many events for Ward 8 residents, for residents from all over the city, certainly hosting many go-go shows and other cultural activities and events. And unfortunately, Doug Jamal is a longtime developer here in Washington, D.C. The Nobody Beats the Wiz fame, that was an old record store that we used to have here. Him and his family own that. And they brought they purchased a lot of property here in D.C. in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and still purchasing property. And he also has a relationship with Donald Trump and is a personal close friend to the Kushner family. And, you know, the overwhelming majority of the electorate here in Washington, D.C. certainly did not support the agenda or the platform of Donald Trump. And yet Donald Trump has a relationship with one of the developers that owns so much property here still today and throughout the last 20 years. And this gentleman, Doug Jamal, has donated a lot of money to many people throughout our city donate a lot of money to many of our elected officials. And I'm gonna go ahead and move this to and introduce Ms. Beth Wagner.
Hello, everyone. My name is Beth Wagner. I'm a member at Serve Your City, and I'm also an organizer for the residents at Brookland Manor who are fighting a redevelopment that stands to displace more than 100 families. Before we go any further in the presentation, you know, the point has been made by Mr. Shabazz and others that the people who are in power came to power when the Financial Control Board took over. So what this is about is power equals the people who have access to money, access to resources. And Reggie is going to speak to that more next. But before we move on, we want you to have this concept in your mind to understand how money is made in development. So the reason that DC is developing so quickly, and the reason that, you know, we've got not just local investors, hedge funds, and development companies here, but international investors from all over the world, Saudi Arabia, Canada, China, Russia, the UK, you know, universities that we've all heard of invest their endowments through money bundlers that fund gentrification in DC. So Harvard and MIT's endowments, for example, are capitalizing handsomely in DC through development projects. We want you to understand just exactly how that money is made, so that you can understand why this is such a good business proposition that everybody wants to get in on it. And the way that money is made in development is by displacing low and moderate income people. Those people in DC are predominantly Black, though not entirely. Latino communities have also been displaced, and many others. And breaking down those apartments and replacing them with luxury units. So I'm going to talk this through real quickly, and I'm going to use Brookland Manor as an example. So the first step is to take an apartment that is occupied by low to moderate income families. Usually, though not always, when we're talking about development in DC, we're talking about tearing down something that already exists and replacing it with something new. There are also vacant land that's available, and that is administered through the government as well. So Jillian Burford is going to touch on that later in the presentation. But for now, let's talk about these buildings that already exist. So Brookland Manor, for example, is one of the largest remaining affordable communities in DC. It's located in Ward 5. Brookland Manor is unique because they have 3, 4, and 5 bedroom apartments, which are affordable. You can ask anyone, including Ward 5 Council Member Kenya McDuffie, who commissioned a study on this, to determine that family-sized affordable units are the scarcest housing resource in the district. They're really rare. So what you want to do if you want to make money off that situation is you will remove the people who live in that apartment, that 3, 4, or 5 bedroom apartment. At Brookland Manor, what has been proposed is a redevelopment that will tear down everything and triple density, meaning build 3 times as large. However, they're going to get rid of all the 5 bedroom units. They're going to get rid of most of the 4 bedroom units and some of the 3 bedroom units as well, and replace them all with much smaller apartments. And the reason that they want to do that is because you can split that space up and put someone wealthy in that apartment and charge more on a monthly basis than you could make when it's just one family. So it's a pretty basic concept, but we just want to spell it out for you, because what is incentivized when the decision-making is about making the most money is directly at odds with what is affordable for people, especially for families. Families get hurt the most in this scheme, especially families with children and young children. So just for reference, you know, DC is one of the most rapidly gentrifying cities in the country. And the effect of this policy, which is making a lot of people extremely rich, and you can see the effects when you walk down the street in DC, is that a conservative 80,000 people, Black people, have been displaced from DC since 2000. And that's based on census estimates. It's probably more than that. We haven't run the numbers ourselves for the most recent decade, but conservatively 80,000 Black people have been displaced from DC. And I'm going to turn it over to Reggie. And if anybody has questions, we'll do questions at the end.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everybody who has presented before me. Just know that power in DC is like the NFL. Money rules, and everyone, and to everyone in the game, you're just a fan. So I need you to know that and understand that. That's exactly what you are in these conversations, a fan. If you take a look at this slide here, you'll see you have such like the NFL commissioner, which is our mayor. Then you have the teams, which would be like historic districts and business improvement districts. Look where our impacted communities are. They're fans. They're in the stands. They have no say-so, and everybody else is running the game that you're watching. So you need to know you're just a fan to these people, and they are really playing the game. I think I'm turning this over to, oh, awesome. Yeah, what am I turning this? So in here, you have this housing landscape. So who gets public land and money? That would be land use. What gets built? What kind of housing is talking about development? How much are people paying to live, which is the rent burden we always talk about. Also, what housing is affordable for working people, those affordable options, and where do people go when they can't afford housing and wait lists are full? Last, which would be the last resort, which would be the unhoused people. And with that, I would turn it over to Jillian.
Hi, my name is Jillian Burford. I'm a DC native. I grew up in Bloomingdale, where I still live in Ward 5, smack dab between Wards 1 and 6. So I will be talking to y'all about the displacement process and more about gentrification and how it impacts the District of Columbia. So the displacement process is pretty clear, actually, not really, but it happens through privatized land use, luxury developments, rent burdens, extreme rent burdens at that, and the lack of affordable options, as in under-resourced public housing, voucher wait lists, and the last resort is often homelessness. So very often public housing is the last stop before homelessness for many district residents, specifically Black DC residents. Okay, next slide. Oh, and also we will be getting more into it. This is the first of a 12-month long project for us. So we will talk more about public housing and all these other things. But in terms of private land use, public land and tax dollars are given away or sold cheap to private developers. And so here we're showing Mcmillan Park. So as a Bloomingdale resident, I actually live directly down the street from Mcmillan Reservoir. And this has been a constant conversation about what should be done with the land. So the whole backstory, so also forgive me if I look down at my notes or provide my own 2 cents to it, because these are issues that are very near and dear to me. So with the fight for Mcmillan Reservoir, there's been a matter of how that land is going to be used and what that money is going to look like when it is used. So as is, Mcmillan Reservoir has been largely unused and has been unused since about World War II. When the park itself was actually closed off, it was public land and it still is to this day. And the reason why it was closed off because of fear of German spies actually tainting the water supply, because yes, Mcmillan Reservoir was active at some point. However, we are long past World War II and the park is still closed off. And the reasoning behind that is solely based in racism and white supremacy. In the area, more Black folks have started moving around Bloomingdale, LaDroit Park, Eckington, a Stronghold. And because of this, it was just decided like, we don't want to intermingle with these people. And so we are missing out on public land that we actually do put our tax dollars towards. And then we have no way to actually access it because the city wants to use that land to develop luxury developments, which we don't necessarily need. We actually don't need them at all because we're constantly being told that the issue is the issue with the housing crisis is a lack of housing, and that housing is in such high demand that absolutely no one can get them. That's not true. There are actually thousands of vacancies and so much public land that is currently being underutilized right now. Go to the next slide. So right here, this is an example of a luxury development that is not actually benefiting low-income DC residents. So this is the Wharf. So developers build dense luxury buildings to maximize profit with a small number of affordable units required by law. So yes, all luxury developments are actually required. Developers are required to provide low-income housing to ensure that no more DC residents are actually displaced. This is what's supposed to be slowing down the process. This has not been done historically at the Wharf. And I want to pull up my notes to make sure that I have these accurate numbers for you. Okay. So with the Wharf, because it is actually a very disheartening situation to know that our city officials have actually allowed this to go down. But there were $300 million in land and subsidies, and this 1 mile long waterfront stretch was sold for $1. There were supposed to be 30% affordable units, and that was lowered and pretty much did not happen. A majority of the units at the Southwest waterfront are not affordable. And also this development did displace Black fishers because the wharf where we all get our crab legs from was also impacted by all of this development here. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So extreme rent burden, that is a common thing. DC has has had the worst bout of gentrification-based displacement than anywhere else in this country. And I think only up until mid or early 2020 was when DC was no longer considered to be the most gentrified city in the country. However, we're still seeing absolutely ridiculous rent prices, and we're still seeing an increased number of folks on the streets as a result. So with the rent burden, increasingly higher rents drive up the prices of everything, including rent. Many households and small businesses are rent poor. So this is where Service City steps in. So we are part of the Cancel Rent Coalition, and we will drop that link to promote what we're trying to do. And we're actually trying to bring this issue towards Anita Bonds, who is actually the chair of the housing committee. So she will be a target, and we can definitely provide more information as is, but we of course will continue to discuss this throughout the entire series. Okay, next slide. Under-resourced public housing. Very often, a lot of people do not understand that affordable housing, what we know of as affordable housing, what we're constantly hearing about, is actually not the same as public housing. So public housing properties are actually under the DC Housing Authority. So those are properties like Bury Farm, Park Morton, as what we have shown here, the former Sursum Quarters, formal Temple Courts, and all of these other places that we're constantly hearing about, but we're not seeing a lot of result from. So with what's going on in the pandemic, I would be, I think it would be negligent for me to not acknowledge the fact that our residents, our neighbors at Kelly Miller are actually struggling throughout the pandemic, like most of us are, but there were an actual like ridiculous number of COVID positive cases at Kelly Miller due to the lack of ventilation. So prior to my time with Serve Your City, I had worked as a housing justice organizer with another organization, and I canvassed at Kelly Miller, and there's not much. There's no breezeways. Many of the windows don't open. There's an extreme lack of ventilation, and as we know with COVID-19, that is not conducive to providing a healthy environment. So with the budget season being pushed back, our city council members actually voted against repurposing money from the streetcar on H Street, and instead of repurposing that into public housing to ensure that our residents are kept safe and that our neighbors and our friends, the people that we love and the people that we care about, have a healthy environment to thrive in. But because Kelly Miller is one of 14 public housing properties that are actually at danger of being removed from the public housing stock, funding into maintaining these properties and actually keeping people safe, it just hasn't been happening. And our city council and our mayor have consciously made this decision. Okay. Next slide. and homelessness. As we had mentioned earlier, public housing is very often the very last step for folks before they hit the streets. With gentrification, based displacement, creating all these rent burdens on our residents and our neighbors, we're seeing more and more and more tent encampments popping up, while we're hearing our elected officials saying that the homeless population has significantly decreased over the years, but we're seeing the exact opposite. We have to provide support to our neighbors. So again, I will drop the link to provide basic services and items and vital resources to the Ward 6 Mutual Aid and the encampments work. That will be dropped again, but yes, this is the work that we're doing. We are trying to make sure that we actually protect our nation's most vulnerable residents, especially right here in the district. Next slide. Okay, and I'm gonna pass it back over.
Thanks, Jillian. So this isn't just education. We also want people to know, the actual initiatives and fights that are going on around the city. And they do follow these same basic landscape principles of housing. So there's a fight for Mcmillan Park, which is land use. There's a fight for development, which would be Brookland Manor. There's a fight for the rent burden with the rent control and cancel the rent. There's a fight for public housing. There's a fight going on with Berry Farms. There's a fight going on with Park Morton. There's a fight going on with Greenleaf. And then also, there's a fight with that last resort, which unfortunately is housing instability, or what we call homelessness. And one of those fights we want to emphasize is the last resort. So I don't know if you knew, but there were, in December of 2019, and we will be updating this information, but there were 10,000 vacant rental units in the city during COVID. Let that sink in for a minute. 10,000 vacant apartment units in the city. And we have close to 10,000 homeless people. And so we came up with the Vacant to Virus Reduction Plan. And this plan talks about, the transmittability of COVID-19, that people in communal homeless shelters and congregate detention facilities are at risk. We should house these people in the district's 10,000 vacant units. One, everyone must social distance to stop the spread of COVID-19. Two, we believe that housing is a human right and need. Three, housing is physical health care. Four, housing is mental and emotional health care. And five, homelessness and incarceration are highly expensive. So we want people to join us in our fight with that. We have a sign-on letter and also a petition for people to sign. We also want you to reach out to your property managers, your ANCs and your council members, and tell them you want the Vacant to Virus Reduction Plan implemented.
All right. Thank you, Beth, Jillian, General Reginald Black, and Brother Shabazz. Thank you so much for your presentations and providing this information to our community. And so let's talk about our closest political entity, the representation that we can touch, because these are the people who don't get paid and work very hard, and they're our neighbors. Everyone is represented by an ANC commissioner. And, the ANC, the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, was created by activists, by organizers, by people from the street, on the street, in the community, who had to fight the local government in the 60s in order to protect their community space. And our ANCs came out of a fight to build a community center in Adams Morgan. And from that movement, joining other coalitions, the people were able to create a ground level political representation for themselves to have influence on the the more official elected office class. And so the advisory neighborhood commissions belong to the people. And it's hard to see over the last 50 years, started, basically in the late 60s to the early 70s, in the last 50 years, it feels as if there has been a disconnect between the people and the people's political government representation. And so we want to reclaim the ANCs for the people, because there are so many people within our community that have been separated from the ANC. And this is an organizing effort, and we need to identify and engage supportive ANCs that want to fight against displacement, fight against Black and brown removal from Washington, D.C. And we need strong commissions and strong commissioners to join this fight against development and rebuild and coordinate a new grassroots political power base. Through this work, we hope to connect with more and more members of the public. We have to connect with each other. Now is so important to connect with each other more than ever, because so many people are quote unquote slipping through the cracks. Now, unfortunately, there's been a normalization of people living in the cracks, but even those cracks are expanding because more and more people are falling out of place here in Washington, D.C., and more people are ending up in the street. So we ask that everyone in this audience, please join this fight to reclaim the ANCs, and let's get involved, because there are a lot of decisions, and the ANC does have influence on the policy decisions made by our elected officials. And so we need to reclaim that power base to make sure that our elected officials are listening to the people and are listening to us. Next slide, please. All right, here's a little short video about the Secret Garden. I don't know if do we have the sound for this? Okay, we don't have the sound. It just shows, the story about.
Do you want me to try and pull up the sound?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. Is that showing the video right now?
Yep.
More than 20 years, this space was an eyesore in our community, filled with trash, drug use, and overgrowth the community and connected businesses had to deal with. More than 12 years ago, the business owners, youth, and community started fixing the problem. Now, since the new development, developer Douglas Jamal says we crossed our property line and this property and space belongs to him, forcing us to spend money in court and lawyer fees to save what's ours. This outside space was built with the help of children and community and has been the heart of historic Anacostia for more than a decade, and even more since the COVID epidemic and pandemic has hit. This is a space where our children are able to be children at a time where violence and COVID has eliminated positive outlets and platforms for our youth and community partners. This space is a treasure that showcases our native go-go music, our history and culture in historic Anacostia as we continue to fight negative forms of gentrification that displaces rare African-American spaces and housing left in Washington, D.C. We must save our community beehive that keeps us connected with community meetings, programming, our organic garden, and live streaming and events during this pandemic. This space is also an asset to the completion of the Go-Go Museum at Check-It. We want Jamal to understand nearly 2 decades later, it's not humane to ask us to leave property we've owned and created because it was said to be ours. We ask Jamal to do the right thing by the people. If he doesn't, we ask our city council and mayor to do for the people what they did for Nat Stadium and hourly feel to protect our community treasure. Please sign and share our petition, as we want Mr. Jamal to know the community needs him to do right by the people this time, as it will be very much appreciated. Thank you very much.
And so, you know, I see this video in the effort to save the secret garden behind both We Act Radio and Check It Enterprises. And I think to myself, you know, without that history of what already happened to Florida Avenue, you know, Northwest, what already happened to 7th Street, Northwest, what already happened to U Street, Northwest, what already happened to 8th Street, Northwest and Northeast, what already happened to Pennsylvania Avenue, Southeast, what's happening to Rhode Island Avenue, Northeast. I mean, you know, 12th Street in Brookland. I mean, we can just go on and on and on and on of all these black spaces, all of these, you know, these spaces where we had, you know, small businesses, where we had self-sustaining communities, where we lived and where we grew and where we shopped and where we worked. And, you know, these spaces are gone. And so, you know, the Secret Garden, it's like a last stand almost. It's like a last stand for us. I mean, you know, there's a plan obviously to quote unquote revitalize MLK Avenue, revitalize Anacostia. And usually revitalization comes with the bulldozer followed by a crane and then the disappearance of Black and brown people. And how many times do we have to sing and dance to this tune? And so in my mind, we have to talk to the people who have relationships with the people who are hurting us. And here you see some of the folks who have received money, I also understand that they have received a lot of support from Black people to acquire their power, acquire their political office. And these folks have taken money from a guy who was threatening to take this space and sell it for development, and from a guy who is absolutely aligned with Donald Trump and the Kushners. And so politicians do what they have to do in order to remain politicians, and that's understandable, but that they are still accountable to the people. And so this has to be a conversation about what are your priorities in representing our interests, the people's interests, the people who actually support you. And so here is a list of the folks who have contributed, or who have received contributions from Doug Jamal. And Doug Jamal happened to receive a pardon from President Trump last week. And so we just wanted to make sure that this information was available to the public, because we do have to, it's urgent, and we do have to do something different. And here we have the opportunities to get engaged, get involved, and take action. We have the vacancy to virus reduction petition. Please sign that. We have the Unhoused Collective's sign-on letter. And the Unhoused Collective is a group of organizations, including the Noma Civic Association and the Serve Your City Ward 6 Mutual Aid and others. We ask that you sign on to this letter. Also, please, as a way for you to get directly engaged in your own neighborhood, in your own community, to join with your ANC and help us organize those of us who are ready to put in this fight to save Black and brown people here in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, we put up the Gofundme Saving Anacostia Secret Garden petition. And then please also sign up for the Brookland Manor Coalition, because Brookland Manor is in danger and under threat, as well as Park Morton, as well as Greenleaf, and other public housing around the city. And so with that, we conclude our first episode of DC 101, and we are ready to, open up the audience for questions if anyone has any. And if you want to, if you want to say your question, just.
You muted yourself, Maurice.
I sure did. It's time for me to stop talking. Thank you, Virginia. Who is first? And Beth and Reggie and Jillian, please unmute so that you can answer some of these questions as well.
We're here.
All right, we got one question that says, why was Jamal pardoned? Who wants to take that?
I'll take that because he's a friend of Donald Trump's and he has a lot of money. It's really simple. You know how Donald rolls. You don't play that game. It's real quick. It's a money exchange. And he's been a friend of the Kushner family since Jared has been a young boy. And so, this may not have been a direct money exchange, but they're certainly politically aligned developers, right?
All right, we got another question that says, which, if any, council members and ANC reps have been supportive / helpful in fights similar to what you have shared today?
Beth, you want to take that?
Yes, it's a big question. Here's what I'll say. Let's talk about council first. Some council members are certainly more open to hearing and to genuinely supporting affordable housing policy in DC, but all but one of them are funded. Their campaigns, well, we've gotten a couple new people in now, but the majority of their campaigns, their primary donor contributions come from real estate development. You saw that at the mayors for the last 20 decades have all come directly from the Financial Control Board. So their success and their future earnings depend on continuing to support that system. So we are looking for kind of revolutionary leadership on the council, which considers models of housing ownership, which are different than just paying private developers extra money to keep things affordable. We know that doesn't work from experience, and also because developers have an incentive to squeeze out affordable units at every turn. And so it's shame on us for continuing to trust the system to do something that is not designed to do. ANCs, there are many of them. I'll say that many of them have been supportive. We are keeping track of all of the new commissioners that were recently sworn in. If you happen to know an ANC or be a commissioner yourself who is interested in true equitable development and different types of ownership models, please let us know. There is a good opportunity right now to be a supporter like that. There's a commissioner who was elected in District 7F07. His name is Joel Caston. Many commissioners have already taken the lead in supporting his installation. He was denied his seat because he put the wrong address on his application. He represents a district which contains only the DC jail where he is incarcerated and a shelter. There is no reason that he shouldn't be seated. He was elected and that seat's going to be vacant if he is not instated. So we're looking for commissioners from all over the district and every commission to stand with the people who are already calling for him to be seated and do that. So anybody else can feel free to chime in.
So with my experience with council members from my previous work, we have heard things from council members saying that they sympathize with us about the lack of affordable housing options, and they actually place themselves in the same position, not understanding that we're not in the same position. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I do have to say that I have heard council members say that in this day and age that they would not be able to afford to buy their current homes. But we're currently dealing with other district residents who are not making six figures, who are having the exact same issues and not seeing a lot of solutions. I do want to point out that I actually have heard Councilman Silverman actually mention the connection between the development of the H Street streetcar and how that impacted her Black neighbors and actually drove folks out. So we do hear them constantly say, okay, so I recognize that this is happening, but this is also happening to me. And it's like, we don't need any more of that. What we need is solutions. What we need is actions. We do hear them constantly say, hold me accountable. And that's what we can do. Not to jump ahead, but I do see that someone had asked, what can a person do to get involved in the advocating for affordable housing? This, being a part of these conversations is what you can do. Hold these people accountable. I mean, not that we're all gonna say like, just go pop up on their front doors, which is the thing, that's bird dogging. That's not the only way. We can send letters, we can annoy them on Twitter, we can pop up at we can always testify. That is something that we can always do to let them know that you're not the only person fighting for this issue, because we do need affordable housing, and not just affordable housing, but deeply affordable housing that folks who are making below $30,000 are making. Let people who are making less than $30,000 can actually afford, because there are folks in this city who make significantly below the poverty line. But DC's median income is $82,000 plus dollars. Not that many people in this city actually make that. So what you can do is absolutely advocate for these folks, advocate for yourselves, and remind the city council members that we elected them and we're also paying them. Like, we pay them, they work for us.
I'll just add that one way to get looped in with that advocacy that Jillian is talking about is signing up for the ANC organizing. That's our, group of our political base that we're trying to start and grow that is committed to these things. So we'll keep you involved if you do sign up there.
And someone asked about the power that the ANC has. I mean, the ANC, ANC commissioners are able to draw up resolutions to submit to the city council on their recommendations on, all types of policies. They're able to provide letters of support for licensing for new businesses, specifically liquor licensing and development projects. And so, between the ANC, the Zoning Commission, the Office of Planning, and the Mayor's Office, City Planning, the ANC recommendations, ideally, principally are part of a larger set of conditions that help the City Council and the Mayor's Office make decisions. Now, you can't really means test that, but they definitely have some weight, no question. And, with all of the development that we've seen over the last 20 years, you can kind of see how the wind is blowing. I can attest to certain ANCs, certainly ANCs within my neighborhood, within my community in Ward 6. I don't believe they've seen a development project that they've turned down, to be honest. And please understand, Ward 6, Capitol Hill, where I live, and south of there around M Street, and certainly Southwest, we've lost a lot of people through mass development that has absolutely changed the look of that part of Washington, D.C., that near southeast and northeast area. I mean, look at H Street as an example. Look at Navy Yard as an example. And so what I would say is, it is important enough to get engaged with your ANCs, because that is the most direct fight. And with that, we parlay that organizing into further action to directly engage with our city council.
Great. We've got a bunch of questions coming in, so I'm going to keep them going. So what is the incentive for DC government to sell land to developers for so cheap? For example, the wharf for $1. Who wants to take that?
I'll go first, and I know General Black has something to say about this too. But so, all right, let's say you're in the business of determining the price of public land, right? Public land, we had a lot of public land that's not receiving any tax revenue, okay? And so it's a win-win. A developer, you have a relationship with a developer as an elected official. You know that these developers can support your candidacy, right? Financially. And so is the game to make it as cheap for the developer who can sidetrack some money towards your candidacy? Is that the process that our elected officials are going through? Who knows? Who's to say what the motivation is behind this? But selling the property, our public land, for $1 helps the financing for developers to incur higher profit margins, whether this public land is developed or not. And then, of course, it also helps the bond rating, which allows developers to borrow money cheaper. And so these things absolutely go into the decision to develop or sell the land, our public land, as our elected officials, to sell it for $1. Mr. Black, what do you have to say about that, sir?
Well, I think Mr. Shabazz has something on that before I go.
I just wanted to add to that. Anybody with a plan of action or an eye for and understands the importance of economic development to sustain a community. If they have the right business plan, they can go to the government and get the same deal that these developers have. And I'm gonna give one historical example. Marion Barry sold United House of Prayer for All People, which has properties all over the city, but their flagship operation is in Shaw. And he gave those lands, massive tracts of land, to the House of Prayer for All People for $1 per unit. And what they did with that property since the 80s is they built homes, single family homes, apartment buildings, senior citizen buildings, and businesses, youth programs. They are making that community work for them and for the wider community at large. So if it's possible to get these tracts of land for $1 even today, as we've seen in the case of the wharf and other examples, then if Black DC starts thinking about economic development, creating its own jobs and its own businesses again, then that is a way to stop gentrification and reverse its effects. There may be other lands that we can get, that Black DC can get for the same deal as these developers. But if we just sit back and complain about what somebody's doing to us, instead of looking for solutions to the problem, rooted in economic development, then we will have more of what we see. Thank you.
I also will add, I think that goes in well to another question which we just got, namely that right now the options for building affordable housing that have been actually practiced is fairly limited. It's always this kind of quid pro quo with private developers, where the developers get public money or public land or both, which is what happened at the wharf, in return for building some type of affordable housing. And affordable, as has been discussed in the chat and elsewhere, not everything that's called affordable by the government is affordable. In fact, most of it actually isn't. Which, to Mr. Shabazz's point, yes, there are still public lands that are up for grabs, so to speak, but recently those have been going as well to private developers. The Ivy City Clubhouse is an example of the community fighting really hard for one plot of land for a very specific need, a recreation center in a historic school in Ward 5, and they have been stymied. They've been ignored by Councilmember McDuffie. So yeah, right now they're only practicing affordable housing in one way, which is paying private developers to do it. And that clearly is not working. So to the question that we got in the chat is, In terms of getting affordable housing built, especially deeply affordable housing in family units, do you all think it's better to advocate for more/stricter requirements for private developments, or to try to increase the capacity of nonprofit or community-directed developers to build those units?
I would say I agree with what Mr. Shabazz is talking about, because that directly is what we need to do. Like, we need to build, nonprofit developer corporations of our own, controlled by us. Yes, I agree with reclaiming the ANCs, which means some of us need to actually draw straws and be commissioners, because we're all sort of like, like-minded. These things are very, very rooted in the community taking control of its destiny. And I think that is what needs to happen. These severely underserved communities need support to take control. They need to control what is going on, because when you look at that landscape of how housing, is built in the city, it starts with land use. So if we can get, our peers and people that are in danger in control of this land, then we set the stake. And so, that's where that needs to happen. The capacity for the impacted community has to be first and foremost. Like, those fans have to not be fans anymore. They have to be in the game. That's where that has to go.
I want to talk a little bit about affordability, and because this word is thrown around all over the place. Affordable units, affordability. You hear this from our political, from our officials, our elected officials, political candidates and elected officials. And it's a challenge because affordability is fluid, right? And things can change quickly for folks, for any of us, in regards to affordability. But there are different median family incomes for our different communities. And the Black average median family income here in Washington, D.C. is $40,000. But the median family income, when it comes to housing affordability, a federal standard for a family of four is $126,000, which encompasses both the Maryland and the Virginia suburbs. And so there's a huge gap between what is affordable if you take in both the Maryland and Virginia suburbs and the population writ large versus what is affordable for the Black community due to structural racism and structural inequality. And so we're not being honest. When you hear elected officials talk about affordability, there's this, it's disingenuous. I mean, it's disingenuous knowing that, no matter what percentage you set the affordability to, and we'll have other webinars to talk about affordability directly, to kind of break down the calculus. And it is complicated at first, but then it eventually starts making sense. So we'll have another class on that. But please be extremely skeptical when you hear elected officials talk about affordability. And if we are ever, and this word equality and equity, right? If equity, you'll hear this word from our elected officials about equity. If equity means we have to, address the past harm, right? If we have to address the past harm that has occurred throughout history here, to ensure that Black people are not in the same conditions that we have been in for all of these centuries. So if we're addressing that past harm, well, we have recent past harm. And that recent past harm is watching, and I have a personal stake in this because this harm is truly casticized within me. I have this harm in my heart, watching the city, remove 50-some thousand Black people from the city. And understanding, in my belief, you can fool me once, but there was a planned disinvestment for a purposed reinvestment. And any of us who have been here for a long time, we have just lived through this experience. And so when you talk about equity, you cannot create equity in a way where you're not considering the different levels of median incomes for the Black community versus the overall community. That's something that we definitely have to discuss. Please, just keep your ears open and view what our political officials, our elected officials, say with a very analytical ear and eye, and they'll throw around these words like affordability and equity, and it's something that we absolutely have to question.
Agreed. And if anybody ever has any questions about something they come across, you can always tweet it at Serve Your City. You can always email Serve Your City. If you sign up for the ANC organizing, you'll get our contact, and you can always just reach out to us as well. We got another question here about social housing. I think I might broaden this out as well. We can talk specifically about social housing, but I am aware of his proposal, and I think it's a good one. What are some alternative models to just paying developers to theoretically create quote unquote affordable housing? What could this look like instead? And I think Mr. Shabazz laid out a good start, which is that land that's up for surplus and distribution starts going to the communities that have been fighting for it instead of being given to developers for luxury development, which is what happens almost every time. I mean, I'm sure someone could find an instance where that hasn't happened recently, but please send it to me because that is typically not what happens. Anybody have any thoughts on alternatives? I can speak to social housing specifically, so, but I see Reggie. Reggie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, definitely want to get into cooperative housing where those residents actually own equity into that. There are some very good examples here in the District of Columbia before, and we have to try to, well, not try, we have to maintain those, models like that where impacted communities, again, they have ownership. They actually have equity and can generate wealth, in that, that use of land that they control. That is, to me, the main alternative when we're talking about alternatives to housing. The alternative here is our community needs better control over, where we live. Like, this is not, how can people come in from foreign countries and all of that, right, and get land that people have been living on for over, 150, 200 years, been slaves and everything. How do we continue to allow that? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is where the rubber meets the road. We have to stop allowing all of these, quote unquote, I use it loosely, foreign entities coming into our communities, saying they're going to do something for our communities, but yet, when you try to bring community members to their meetings and try to get them involved and you bring them plans that the community has come up with, they brush it off. They say no, they say nothing. They say they need to get back to you. That has to stop, and that means that we have to start controlling our own land. Like, this is Indian Negro removal going on, and that's the reality.
I agree. And to go back to an earlier question, should we keep trying to regulate private developers or move to community-based models of ownership? I agree 100% with Reggie. Like, community-based models of ownership is the only path to sustainability, because the thing that makes housing expensive is the need to make as much profit as possible. And co-ops started in DC in response to this originally. There's a long history of Black-owned co-ops in the district in the 70s and 80s, which I'm sure Mr. Shabazz could speak to more. Other models of alternative housing could be community land trusts, which is where the land is owned by a group that's not a developer, by the community, and so it can be used for community needs. It's insulated from the profit incentive. Social housing specifically is government-owned, publicly owned housing, and the residents who live in it have a mixture of incomes so that it's affordable for every individual. They could pay roughly 20%, 30% of their income, and that amount of rent is affordable and sustainable for everyone who lives there, and it goes to repay construction loans. And over time, it pays for the maintenance of the building. So this avoids what has been done to public housing, which is that the money, which is supposed to be allocated by the government, who is the landlord, to keep buildings up, has instead been allocated to a $1 billion project at Nats Park, or $600 million to Audi Field, you know? So it's really not about having the money, it's about how the money is spent. And like the streetcar, the H Street streetcar that Jillian mentioned, you know, that money could have gone to public housing repairs, but the council chose to direct it to the streetcar. Why is the streetcar important? Because if your property is near to a streetcar, your property value goes up on paper. Like, this is all about just maximizing money. So social housing has a dedicated amount of money for maintenance, which means that people's housing would be permanently secure. So once you've set aside the need to make as much money as possible off housing, which when you do that, people who don't have money or enough money are going to be without a house. I mean, that's just the fact. When you set that aside, there are all kinds of things that you can do, which actually enable community control. Sorry for the tirade.
One of the arguments that the opposing side presents is that more density creates more affordability. And, you know, we have many people who, you know, some of us would be more inclined to be aligned with politically, who believe in this. And to me, this is such a typical kind of a classist fight, because I think what they think that they've experienced is more density creating more affordability. But anyone that has lived here for 10 days, I mean, day one, the city is at one as dense at one level, and day 10, the density increase is off the roof, right? And so we've seen over the last 10, 20 years, we've seen a level of density that I don't think the city has seen in a few generations. And yet the affordability escapes us. And the more people that are packed in, the higher they build, the more dense that our neighborhoods become. Let's think of Shaw, let's think of H Street Northeast. The more density that we've seen, the level of unaffordability has increased, not decreased. And I'm telling you, they are following some, you know, elite private school, Ivy League economic principles that are not applicable to the lived experience of anyone who has lived here for any amount of time. And so we have to just really keep questioning and analyzing these theories about quote unquote smart growth. This is the Smart Growth Coalition, who believe we can add more density and that will drop the prices. But that is absolutely not considering the historical harm that Black people have experienced, both in the past to, you know, with the wealth gap, and certainly the lived experience that Black and brown people have had in the last 30 years here in Washington, D.C. Does anyone from the audience want to say anything? We can unmute you. Just raise your hand if you have a comment or anything.
I did want to add a couple things. So further on into the to our series, we are going to talk about the comprehensive plan, which is work that I know everyone on this panel from through the Grassroots Planning Coalition. So I definitely wanted to highlight that because the comprehensive plan is a 1,500-page document that outlines every single facet of development in DC. It also engages with the Office of Planning, pretty much all of the development agencies in the district. And I did see that someone mentioned the Douglas Community Land Trust, and I wanted to highlight that because Community Land Trust are a tool necessary to actually maintain affordable housing, like actually truly affordable housing in the way that we actually need. That's what community land trusts do. So I do see that Kimon Freeman actually had added the link to the land trust. If you are interested in learning about what that is, please check out their website. That is one tool. We do have co-ops, but there's also TOPA and DOPA. And TOPA is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, and DOPA is District Opportunity to Purchase Act. So while we do have DOPA, the district has never used it. The DC government has consciously made the decision to never utilize this program that could actually help maintain deeply affordable housing permanently. Actually, affordable housing units are temporary. It's not a solid permanent fix. They actually are contracted to about 10 to 15 years. That's when they have the option to actually renew that. So we're always hearing, oh, like, let's put this into the hands of the developers. That means nothing after 10 to 15 years of this building's existence, and it suddenly does not exist anymore. So the people who are living in those units, where do they go? Because suddenly they're going from affordable to market rate. And how do we keep these folks here? So again, we will talk about the comprehensive plan at a later time, but that is a way that that district residents could actually have a voice and have a say, as well as ANC commissioners. It just has not been done well. Like at all. So folks who are familiar with the comprehensive plan process, it's a lot, it's a mess, and we all know that, but that is one way that we can engage more on that level. I feel like I had one more thing to say, but I'm gonna let y'all handle it, and I will jump back whenever I feel like it.
Hey, Jillian, can you unmute folks who may want to jump in and, speak their clout?
Yes.
Come on, audience. Wait a minute. I see an ANC commissioner here on this call. And not only do I see an ANC commissioner, I see my ANC commissioner on this call, the newly elected Allison Horn. Allison, why don't you say something, please? Introduce yourself.
You put me on the spot over here. No, I'm really grateful for you guys having this session. I mean, I've been talking to Maurice quite a bit about housing issues in our ANC and in our area. 6B is rough. I really appreciate the organizing that you guys are doing at the ANC level. I just want to say, I'm all ears, and I would love to kind of continue to keep kicking around ideas with you guys. And, one thing that I think is kind of a tough spot that I've recently found myself in is if and when developers who describe themselves as affordable housing developers decide that they should reach out to me as a representative of the community and, want my thoughts on what the community wants. Of course, I can say as many things as, you guys have said about like sort of affordable to whom, and, I guess push for the deepest level of affordability and multiple unit or multiple bedroom units. But I think, I would love to continue swapping ideas with you guys in terms of like how to most effectively use that position to work within the current system, if that's even possible, while trying to, fight for more of the sort of community owned models out there.
Well, thank you, Allison. And poor Allison, she's got to deal with me since she is my ANC commissioner, my SMD, and Lord knows, everybody knows I'm a pain in the ass. And so Allison is going to be my first target because she took the spot. She took the spot of leadership, and that's her responsibility. And so my job is to make sure that Allison has a clear path to understanding many of the challenges, historic challenges and current challenges that so many of us born and raised and longtime DC residents are feeling, and understanding that, there's a machine against us, and that machine has claimed a lot of victories in the last 30 years, totally reshaped and reconfigured what our city looks like. And unfortunately, there has been a price that has been paid. To me, the increase in unaffordability for all of us who are here in Washington, D.C., for all of us, old timers that remain and the newcomers, because in my belief, it's coming for everyone, right? And some of us, unfortunately, we don't have another place where we can go that we can call home, because this is our home. And it is a challenge. And so my job is to make sure that Allison understands that I'm going to be a pain in her ass, but only because I have a love for the people in our neighborhood, in our community. And I have a love for the people in our city. And I hope that you too out there will be a pain in the ass to your SMD representative, your single member district representative, and your ANC commissioner, because they do work for you, and they're here to provide support and services to you. And that's what you should expect out of our elected officials. And so, you know, we'll have our challenges, but we'll find ways where we can always work together. I saw one question about, you know, what we can do as far as social housing and all of this. And see, in my mind, it is the market rate model that has driven us to this position. And, you know, I'm certain that my political beliefs, you know, don't align with probably most people. But I believe housing is a human right, and it is absolutely a disgrace against humanity to allow anyone to die on the street because they can't, quote unquote, afford to live. Many people are dying in our society because they can't afford to live, whether that be in our healthcare system, whether that be in our supposed criminal justice system, whether that be in our capitalistic market rate based housing system. And so people are dying because of these systems. And so for me, I believe in public housing for all. So if public land can be given for $1, given away for $1 to developers, certainly the city can afford to finance its people for the same price. And what my demand is, the amount of public money spent on any development project in the last 30 years, whatever that tabulation is, however much money that the city, that the people have actually contributed, taxpayer money contributed to the financing for these developers, whatever that money is, that's the exact same amount that I think we need to demand for all of us for public housing. Seems fair. Any other questions? Someone brave, come on. Hey, Coy, why don't you talk about Southwest and all the work that you guys do down there? Coy disappeared on us as being shy. I see a lot of friends on here, a lot of really good people. Hey, Jesse, want to talk about our work that we do to support our unhoused community?
Hey y'all. I don't even, can you hear me?
Wonderfully.
Okay. I think, thanks for doing this. This is awesome. As Reggie and Maurice have mentioned, there are about 7,000, 10,000 people who live on the streets tonight in DC. And that's unacceptable. And the only way to end that is for the government to do what they're supposed to do, and is make sure everyone has the housing they need to stay safe and thrive. So we're doing a lot of work with homeless encampments, but also working to make sure the mayor does what she said she was going to do 5 years ago and end homelessness. So we're about to enter into DC's budget season, and we're going to be calling on them to make sure that no one else dies without housing. And we're just grateful to have Sophie City and People for Fairness and so many other folks on this in that fight for housing justice for everybody. And for us, that especially means people who are living outside.
Absolutely. I see the wonderful Reverend Wanda Thompson, who is the minister over at a church in Ward 8, and she does and has been for many years doing incredible stuff for so many of us. Reverend Thompson, you want to say hello?
Well, first of all, let me just congratulate you all for this webinar. I think was very informative, and I really appreciate all the work that you all are doing. And I think it's really important for people to become informed about particularly the comp plan and what it means. I think a lot of people still are not clear on how it's going to impact, impact us in the city. So I encourage everybody to sign the petition that you have and to stay abreast of what's going on in the city, because it's important. And I also just want to salute you for all the work you're doing through Serve Your City and Mutual Aid. You know, the kudos that you've gotten have been really well deserved. And I appreciate everybody that's on the call. And I think we all just need to work together to really reclaim our city. Thanks.
Amen, Reverend Thompson. Thank you so much. And Brother Camone, hey, tell us if you're still on. Tell us what's going on with the window in front of We Act. If you're still on,
I'll be trying to stay in the corners. I always want to be the quiet, silent type. I just never keep my mouth closed long enough. Peace to everybody, and I'm glad to see such a great turnout up here. And my brother, the project that I want to do with you. You just nailed it in your last little monologue. We're just going to take a sample of what you said and a couple of your slides and throw it into our gumbo. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, we're creating a visual revolutionary mixtape that will be toured around the city in every ward. And we'll be kicking it off on April the 4th on 14th and U Street. As those you may know, April 4th was the government assassination of Martin Luther King. And he died fighting for a lot of these things that we're sitting here talking about right now: universal basic income, healthcare for everybody, housing was a human right. All we have to do is just repeat the same words from the radical side of Martin Luther King and use that figuratively to beat these people across the head with, because no one can say no to Martin Luther King. All right. So I urge y'all to use Martin Luther King words as y'all vibranium, okay? Your Captain American shield. And it will really drive the point home, because right now, as I put in the chat, that everything that was politically impossible is now politically inevitable. Is now the system we had before was unsustainable. We know that, but because of the crisis we're now in, it is what is the word? It is now a system that is no longer attainable. We can't even acknowledge or justify any of this anymore. Everything that's been said here is just a matter of time. We just have to educate the public, because the public is what's holding this up. The media system is what's defending the current system, and then we have to call those people out. The fact that the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, and he owns the Whole Foods. You know, everybody knows about Amazon. You know, Amazon pays zero in taxes. Amazon pays zero in taxes. That alone should get enough people up out of their seat. Okay, taxation without representation, but we're gonna sit here and get everything we need from Amazon. Every little thing we need, Amazon. We're actually contributing to our own oppression. And so,
hey, come on, can I say something about that?
I'm sorry, you got me started. I was trying to be quiet.
No, listen, I love it. You know, that's what I do. I love it. I love it. And we go on forever. You know the irony about that, what you said about Jeff Bezos. Mm-hmm. So Serve Your City had to, Ward 6 Mutual Aid, we had to make sure we got laptops and tablets and the internet to kids, right? And we put them in we put those devices into the backpacks, because the school system, the school systems are the school systems, and they are what they are. I call it the Jim Crow school systems. And so it demanded for us to do something. And in order for us to get the supplies together, and I know Virginia knows all about this because she yelled at me about it, we had to use Amazon, because it is the easiest way for us to get the supplies that we need, to organize the supplies we need and get it out to the children and the families that need it. Now, you have to understand, Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world, okay, right? My father was locked up. I was on Section 8. I had food stamps, and I built an organization to pay Jeff Bezos tens of thousands of dollars so that the children had laptops and devices in order to be able to continue in school. Now that takes a big chunk out of Serve Your City's bottom line. But for him, that's about 2 seconds of his salary where everybody can have a device and internet access. And so, Brother Kimon, trust me when I say I'm in my feelings about the irony of this situation. When a poor Black boy like me, just trying to make sure our people have exactly what they need in order to survive and to thrive and to compete in this world, has to pay the richest man in the world who lives in this town in order to take care of the people. And see, this is the monster that I'm talking about. And I'll be taking a lot of it out on Allison and all of the elected officials that run my way, because I hear talk, 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 and our people still have our hands out because we don't have what it is that we need. And so it's 7:30. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If you want to hear more, and there's a lot of, not just Black rage, there's a lot of Black beauty along with this Black rage. They're one and the same almost, intertwined. Thank you so much for coming to DC 101, our first episode. It's been a blessing to share this time with all of you. Let's go out there, take this information, sign up for all the petitions that we have out there. Take this information. Please get in touch with us if you need more information. We'll be hosting another webinar episode in February. God bless you. Y'all have a good evening. Thank you so much.